In what sounds like a setup to a bad joke, a Gen Xer with an MBA applies to 1,500 positions and is unable to land a job in over 10 years. What's the problem here, and is that MBA actually helping or hurting him? Stick around and I will tell you more. Let's make no mistake here. Today's job market is very difficult, and even people who have very solid backgrounds are still struggling to get the phone to ring on a consistent basis. Competition's through the roof, and as a result, employers have their pick of the litter, especially for these elusive remote jobs that are quickly drying up. In fact, Amazon is now joining the fray as the latest tech company who has demanded their entire workforce return to the office full time. And as I was perusing the news, I came across a really interesting article on Business Insider about a Gen Xer who had advanced degrees and despite applying for 1,500 jobs, had yet to land a position of meaning in the last 15 years. So I want to dig into that article, break it down, and see where this guy might be going wrong, because even in a bad job market, that's still a really poor result. But before we get into that, if you're interested in more career-related content directly from a corporate recruiter, make sure you hit that subscribe button. You might also want to hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future content, especially if you're in an active job search. And I'd also like to thank this video sponsor, DeleteMe. More on them in a minute. Okay, so let's take a look at this article that was on Business Insider. And the heading says, a Gen Xer with an MBA can't get a job despite 1,500 applications. And he says that his degrees have been useless. So let's find out what exactly is going on here. So this is the person, his name is Marcel, and it looks like he's in the IT world. And we'll come back to this photo in just a second here. It says that Marcel, 48, used to have few problems getting jobs in the 90s without a high school diploma. He says after what he estimates to be 1,500 applications since the early 2000s, he can't land a stable job in his field even with an MBA. He's a father of 4 who lives in rural eastern Pennsylvania, and he struggled to land a long-term job in tech or counseling. So they're two completely different job types. It says that he's held part-time positions and has built his own inventory software selling to companies. However, he rarely gets interviews even after redoing his resume 24 times. So let's just point out real quick, if he's in rural eastern Pennsylvania, and I'm not sure exactly where he lives, but I'm just going to assume that he lives fairly far away from a tech hub. I mean, I guess Philly or maybe the Scranton, Reading area might have some positions, but if you're on the far side of that area, you're probably pretty limited geographically as to how far you can drive, so you're automatically going to be reducing the number of opportunities pretty drastically. So he's probably looking for remote jobs in addition, and here's the thing. Remote jobs, especially in the tech industry, have dried up drastically. And unfortunately, to make matters worse here, companies like Amazon forcing people back into the office is going to essentially constructively discharge a whole bunch of them. Some really talented people with very strong resumes are suddenly going to hit the marketplace looking for those remote jobs because that's where they came from and that's what they're used to. So now he's going to be competing with all of these high-powered tech people for these entry-level, near entry-level, or experienced jobs. In addition to that, every year, all of these colleges pump out these new grads into the job market looking for these same positions. And so it becomes much more difficult the further you get into your career, and especially the further away from when you got your education and were considered technically entry-level. So he's kind of in a bad spot here. And he says, I wish there was an easier way, but traditional ways of looking for employment have been overshadowed by artificial intelligence and the lack of human interaction. And he noted that his applications are likely being thrown out due to his lack of recent work experience. And this is an astute observation. I would surmise that he's probably being rejected due to his lack of recent work experience, or if his most recent meaningful work was 15 years earlier, that's certainly a big job gap to try to justify, and I don't think a degree is going to get you over that hump. And he goes on to say that he is one of many Americans with traditional work credentials who can't land a decent paying, stable job, especially at a time when college degrees are becoming more necessary to landing well-paying jobs. Now, there's some anecdotal evidence to go both ways there, but I'm not going to debate the merits in this particular video. But the one thing that does come to mind is if you're applying for 1,500 jobs, you're giving out your data to a lot of different employers, and that's where today's sponsor comes into play, DeleteMe. So when you apply for jobs, your information is often sent over to a third party to verify employment and other types of things. And that information is oftentimes being provided to third-party data brokers. The problem is that these third-party companies often get hacked, like I personally experienced, and they also sell your information to even more data brokers. And we don't have any control over it. And the information that they've got is scary. Social security numbers, addresses, contact information, even tax records, salary information and data. There's a lot of scary stuff out there. And there's peace of mind knowing that there's a company like DeleteMe who is actually looking out on our behalf. So what DeleteMe does is it scours the internet looking for instances where your information is showing up potentially with data brokers or on the World Wide Web. And then it actively works to scrub your information for you. And to sign up for it's really simple. You actually do have to provide some of your own personal information in there so that they know what to look for. But then they get to work and they start removing stuff almost immediately. And when they begin the monitoring process, you'll get reports emailed to you telling you about the activities, how many times your information has been found, and what they're doing to automatically scrub it for you. And the system is super easy and convenient. And it's just an added layer of protection so that I can ensure that my personal information is secure. And if you're interested in signing up for their service, you can get a 20% discount by using the code layoff. I will leave a link down in the comments below. So getting back to the article, it tells a little bit of his back history and how he had kind of a rough upbringing. He was able to land himself a head technician job for a computer company in Arizona and then landed a role at Intel in 1999. And there he worked as an IT manager, apparently without any degree. Then he ended up moving with his wife to Arizona to be closer to his family. Given that the 4-year degree was becoming increasingly a prerequisite for many of the jobs, he received a bachelor's degree in computer programming. Now, I will say the bachelor's degree in computer programming is probably the smart decision at that time because that indeed is a barrier to entry for a lot of companies. Not every company. I've worked for several that didn't require degrees for certain technical roles. But in general, I would say having a bachelor's degree is going to be probably better than not having one if you're interested in a professional level job. And so he said the job market in Arizona was extremely difficult, and he actually did the kind of old school way of walking from company to company with resume in hand, which resulted in some job offers. Apparently, back in the day, that actually worked. I've never lived in a time when that actually worked for me. I've never done that, and I've never had job seekers do that with me. So if your retired grandfather tells you that you just need to march into that office with a firm handshake, look them dead in the eye, and hand them your resume, and that's how you get a job, unfortunately, that advice is not at all realistic anymore. So he says that he wanted to make progress in his career, so here he enrolls in an MBA program in technology management and starts turning down positions as a result. And this is where I think he made his first critical mistake, because I actually think he was doing pretty well up until then, considering he worked at Intel, didn't even have a college diploma, but he eventually ends up getting this bachelor's degree, and it seems like he's making good progress. So he's got some experience, and he's now got the bachelor's degree. So everything should be set up. And if he has a very clear career strategy, he should be able to make very calculated decisions from here on out. And he isn't successful in continuing his career where he left off. And so there starts to become this job gap that happens. The longer you stay in this job gap, the more difficult it gets. But his problem is deciding to go for an MBA when his career path didn't necessitate it, because the MBA program in and of itself oftentimes is not going to be demanded by many jobs. And the only time in my career where I've ever had an advanced degree, let alone an MBA, be required was for a research scientist role in semiconductors in Silicon Valley. And this was just a very, very technical position. Even the executive positions that I recruited, an MBA may be preferred, but it wasn't an absolute requirement. And so him going and getting this MBA is like going and getting a sports car to drive in a 25 mile per hour zone. You just simply don't need it. It's a waste of money. And he could have been doing a lot more value-added activities, like going and getting some certifications that might have been more valuable to the job market at that time. You know, go and look at these job postings and see what employers are demanding. And I guarantee you, he wouldn't find very many at all that would require an MBA program. And in fact, most of your competition wouldn't also have those degrees. Here's the deal. Employers are not going to value the MBA program if they don't care about it, if it's not a requirement for them. The fact is that experience is going to trump education in 99% of the cases. The only times that I recommend that you go for an MBA is if you're on an executive career path and or you can get into one of the very top business schools in the country because the networks alone may be worth the price of admission. In his case, he got the MBA program and at the same time turned down these positions that would actually make him more marketable. Because it's clear in his case, he wasn't necessarily on an executive career path, even as he secured a chief technology officer job for an import-export company later on. And I promise I'm not trying to be judgy here, but something about this chief technology officer job at this import-export company in New Jersey just doesn't seem to quite fit. There is something off about this because he didn't have a lot of relevant experience, and an MBA alone is not going to promote somebody into a reputable company as a chief technology officer. So in this case, I'm wondering if it was a title alone and maybe it was for a very small company. But nonetheless, 2 years into the job in 2010, he faced a difficult decision with his family that cost him his job, and he said he was never really able to recover from that. So we're going back to 2010 here, that he has been, for all intents and purposes, unemployed in his career path. So he says that he can't find a job, and since then he struggled to find anything relevant to his skill set. He couldn't land anything beyond first-round interviews for IT roles. And in fact, he says, I've walked into local businesses and started talking about working, and I'm told that I would not be happy working there because it would not be part of my high-skilled profession. And he said, this is even after not including my education, not to become overqualified. However, when they review my work history, it's clear that I am. So here's the deal with this. When you have the MBA, that's the first thing, especially if you're going for a relatively low-level job, a local job, you just walk in off the street and you talk to the receptionist at the front desk of a small company, you're showing that you have an MBA and you're showing these titles of chief technology officer. And if this job truly wasn't the right level, in other words, they just threw a title at you, it actually probably would scare a hiring manager off. It would probably scare me off, just to be perfectly honest with you, because I'm going to look at somebody who either has a title that seems inflated, which is a red flag, or it's somebody that is very overqualified, or is indeedly overqualified, and we're not going to be able to keep them happy. If you have a mismatch at the level versus the job that we're actually hiring for, the chances of you turning over relatively quickly are almost 100%. And I know people don't want to hear that, especially if you're somebody that's stuck between a rock and a hard place, but it's reverse leveling. And that becomes a very dangerous thing if you're not very careful here. Then in 2015, so this is 5 years after not having success in the job market, he was desperate for job security, so he enrolls in a master's program with a marriage counseling as a backup plan, although he ran out of financial aid with only 4 classes left and had to drop out. So again, he's going back for this, re-educating himself in family and marriage counseling. And I would say for a family and marriage counseling, which is a completely different career path, master's program probably is a standard, I would imagine. I know, like, with a lot of like advanced education for teachers and things like that, so I would assume that that's the same there. I can't say for sure, but he said within a few years, when he returned, he was only told that half of his classes would count for the curriculum change. So it's like this guy just keeps on getting punched left and right as he's trying to just get back on his feet. And it says that he received that advice from career counselors to finish my master's degree in counseling, which is not easy because of the cost. Now, I will say, finish your degree in master's in counseling only if the industry is asking for it, if it's required. And if this is truly part of your long-term career goal, if you're not trying to become a counselor in earnest, if that's not really your passion, and you're going out and rebranding yourself, and it's cost a ton of money to get these degrees, and then you have to start over again anyway, I would just say be really careful about rebranding yourself. If you decide to rebrand yourself and switch careers, it has to be a very purposeful decision that you're making. It's not just one that you willy-nilly, you go out on a kind of a, let's just say, a desperate play and start to rebrand yourself, because it changes the entire trajectory of your potential career. And then he added that hiring managers would not give me a chance even though I had 3 years of education. Yeah, because you don't have the full qualification for the role, plus you have no experience. It's like he's just in this perennial cycle of being stuck in that loop of not having enough experience to be qualified, but not being able to get the experience. And it's just kind of this vicious loop that he's in. And again, the problem is that he now has all of these other people coming into the job market behind him. And the further away from his starting point that he gets, the much more difficult it's going to be, because he's now branded as somebody that's kind of unhireable. And unfortunately for him, this is a real dilemma that he's facing. He said he still stays in touch with some of these career coaches at previous universities, and they've offered him some help. And he began catering his applications specifically for each role, sending out personalized emails to hiring managers, which are two excellent practices. I absolutely recommend you do both of them. But the problem is that catering your application that's just not aligned to the jobs isn't going to do anything. It's a good practice if you're actually qualified for the roles that you're applying to. But if you're sending out customized resumes that still don't show a clear fit because you just don't have the experience they're looking for, unfortunately, you're probably going to have limited results with that as well. So it's easy to say, customizing my resume doesn't work. It actually does work if you're qualified for the positions that you're applying to. And unfortunately, it looks like in this case, he's probably spraying and praying, and his profile is very confusing to the hiring teams. Are you an IT guy? Are you a marriage counselor? Like, what are you? Those are two completely polar opposites. So it's like this requires a lot of coaching and a lot of skill on how to navigate this transition. And he said that he would only get 2 emails back from recruiters saying they would keep him in mind for positions. I mean, that's to be expected because he's just not a good fit for these jobs. When I say that candidates apply for these jobs that don't have the qualifications or the skills, and that's what you're competing against, unfortunately, and I know this sounds harsh, and I'm really not trying for it to sound harsh, but he's one of the ones that's just not qualified. And unfortunately, he's now like 10 or 15 years past where he made the critical mistake of getting the MBA and foregoing some of the jobs that he didn't pursue. It says in total, he's applied to 1,500 jobs unsuccessfully, getting 5 to 10 rejections daily this year. And here's the thing. For 1,500 jobs divided by the 14 or 15, you just say 14 or 15 years, roughly 100 jobs that you're applying to per year, average out across those 10 year or 15 years. It's probably likely that he didn't apply to a lot of jobs early in, and he's probably applying to a lot more now. That's why he's getting these 5 to 10 days. And that's a lot of rejections, even for somebody that's applying for a lot of roles to be getting each and every day. He says he's redone his resume over 25 times, spending $300, creating a professional one that yielded 0 results. Here's the deal. It doesn't matter how many times you rewrite your resume if you don't have any credential and your resume is showing a 15-year age gap. There's like even my Resume Rocketfuel course couldn't help him in this case. I mean, I'm being perfectly honest with you. You have to have the right stuff on your resume. You have to make yourself at least somewhat marketable and do things very strategically. And unfortunately, he's in a case where, this is kind of like I hate to say it, it's like a dead end for him. So he's asked his friends in IT to review some of his projects and his applications. He says he's asked his friends in IT and project management to review his applications. And he says that he's in the middle ground. He's overqualified for many entry-level positions, but underqualified for jobs in related industries. He acknowledges that hiring expectations have skyrocketed over the past few years, which is indeed the case. But he's even tried to removing some of the educational background on his applications to seem less qualified, to no avail. And he added that because of the technology is rapidly changing, he may be behind on what many jobs expect applicants to have, in particular with AI. I would say, what has he been doing for the last 15 years? Why hasn't he gotten any certifications in the cloud infrastructure or in some sort of like a DevOps type of role where he could have marketed himself even without a degree? And in this case, he's also, again, looking at, given his location 30 miles from any cities, he's focused on finding a remote position, although he's been dwindling and getting more competitive. If you haven't been employed in a while, I mean, in a while is an understatement here. 15 years is a lot longer than a while. I can't magically snap my fingers and make it happen. And that's the truth. No career coach, no resume service, no magic bullet, no AI system that you're going to use to customize your resume or any of this stuff is going to help in this case. It's really boiling down to what have you been doing over the last 15 years to truly make yourself marketable to the types of roles that you're interested in. So I would be going and absolutely doubling down on what are high in demand skills that are relatively rare in the market. I mean, that's really all you can do, and double down on it. Work on passion projects. Try to get some level of display of your expertise, whether it's building out, a passion project, putting it on a GitHub, really trying to market yourself as an expert in your space and building out targeted networks. But his biggest issue is that he made major career faux pas because he didn't have a clear strategy all the way back at the beginning of his career. And that is the single most catastrophic error that he made. One other thing that I wanted to point out is, I don't know where they got this photo, but the photo, if he was including this, and this is what he sent over to the Business Insider magazine, this is not the most flattering picture of somebody that's trying to get a job. I would expect to see a suit and tie, really putting together a professional presentation. Here he's in a recliner with a tank top on, and just it doesn't come across at all professionally. So it's like You kind of have to act the part. And so I'm just skeptical of everything that I've read, unfortunately, in this summary. And it's not a wonder why he's having so much struggle in his career. So what about your thoughts on education? If you've gotten the MBA, do you feel it's worth it? Leave a comment and let me know. And if you're struggling in your job search, like this poor guy is, that's actually something that I specialize in. I've got a website called alifeafterlayoff.com, which is loaded with insider tips and strategies on how to get a job with more conviction and authority. And I share my deepest and most intimate knowledge in the form of some training courses. And in particular, again, related to this article, one thing I would not recommend that you do is go off and hire an expensive resume writer because your results are probably going to be lackluster. So instead, I recommend that you learn how to write your own resume, because this is a core career skill that you'll take throughout the entirety of the rest of your career. And that's why I created the course Resume Rocketfuel, which is designed to do exactly that, to teach you how to write a recruiter-approved resume. And I have a course about job search and interviewing called the Ultimate Job Seeker Bootcamp. But in addition to that, the one that I think he needs the most help with is career strategy, because he made some major and catastrophic errors that are going to be nearly impossible for him to solve today. And that's where the ultimate career blueprint comes in, because it teaches you how to avoid these pitfalls so that you don't end up in a situation like this person. And unfortunately, he's probably at the point where his best option is to leverage the power of targeted networking and build himself a very clear brand. And that's where unlocking LinkedIn comes in. It teaches exactly how to do that, how to skip the recruiter, how to establish authority on that platform so that you can get into the interview process even if you might not have the perfect background for it. Anyway, not gonna lie, this is a tricky one. Feel for the guy, and I hope he lands on his feet soon. Appreciate you watching. We'll see you on the next one.